ladies and gentlemen, you are more than welcome to another episode of the Coffee at 11 show, brought to you on this beautiful midweek morning here, courtesy of wigwam.ie SME peer support. Delighted in particular to have my friend for many years, delighted to say he's my friend for many years, and special guest, very special guest this morning is Gerry Duffy. And I'm going to ask Gerry to say hello and cheers us with your coffee mug. Say hello to us all and show us. That counts perfectly well, Gerry. That's classic Gerry Duffy. I love it. Gerry is a master.
Delighted to be here.
And indeed, it's our pleasure having you here, Gerry. Thanks for taking the time out to visit with us today. And for everybody who's joined us here this morning, because Gerry Duffy is in as our guest, you're more than welcome to the Coffee at 11 show. So let me just tell you a little bit about Gerry before we bring the man himself in and hear it from his own words. Gerry Duffy, obviously his business name is the Gerry Duffy Academy. What does your business do, Gerry? Corporate speaking and training, leadership, goal setting, public speaking, and personal development. How long established? For 10 years. How many employees? Me plus one part-time team member. Goes on to say, Gerry Duffy is an international speaker in the areas of goal setting, leadership, and public speaking. His CV has seen him work with over 1,000 companies and organizations since 2010, and a personal passion for sport has seen him complete many extreme sporting challenges, including running 32 marathons in 32 consecutive days. My goodness. His popular keynotes and workshops contain insights into how we can get the very best out of ourselves and are filled with ideas and strategies that can help us not just in the work environment, but also outside of work too. In the past 10 years, he's delivered over 1,500 presentations. Clients who have hired Gerry include Facebook, Google, SAP, Salesforce, Medtronic, Workday, Hewlett-Packard, and British Gas. And he has authored 3 books, including The Goal Getter, 35 different ways to reach your goals. And here's something I didn't know about Gerry. Gerry started working the same day as he did his last Leaving Cert exam. He said, of course, Leaving Cert might be history at this stage, but anyway, back in the day, he started working, and he started as a night porter in a hotel that same night at 11 p.m. Just shows the measure of the man, focused man who's not afraid of the hard yards. Gerry Duffy, great pleasure. Thank you for joining us here. Gerry, in your own words, please, will you take us back to Gerry Duffy, pre-Gerry Duffy Academy? Bring us up through those early years, please.
Well, maybe we'll start with 1985, that Leaving Cert, the final day of the Leaving Cert. It was actually the history exam. I think history was the last exam I did. And I went to work that night because I needed the money column. That's why I did it. And I always remember I was paid, and this is 1985. And I remember if I worked 9 hours, I got paid £9. But if you did the overnight, because there was a night porter and day porter, night porter, day porter, if you did the overnight, you got a £5 bonus. So I used to get £14 for a 9-hour shift. But no, so I left school at whatever level of motivation. But school and I didn't get on. I kind of scraped through the Leaving Cert. Went to England actually for 8 or 9 months. Worked in a pub in England when I was 18. And I went there on the promise of a job in an insurance company, but they said, listen, come over, and if you like London, then we'll maybe interview you for the job. So I went over on that premise, ended up getting a job as a barman in a pub, and worked there for 9 months. This was in 1986. And it was one of the best things I ever did, because it gave me, when I arrived in Euston Station in London, I literally didn't know anybody. I had a number of a guy that was giving me a job in a pub, and I got a taxi, and about 2 minutes later the taxi said, you're here. It was literally across the road. I hadn't a clue about London. Literally, it was literally across, like 2 minutes in the taxi. And anyway, I worked there for 9 months, but it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because it really threw me. I went to a boarding school. I was from a provincial town in Ireland, and all of a sudden at the age of 18, you're thrown into this, one of the biggest cities in the world, not knowing anybody. Had to really, it's almost like somebody threw you in the deep end, and you got to learn how to swim. And I did learn how to swim. I wouldn't say I overly enjoyed it. I love going back to London now, but I just, it was challenging work, and the job with the insurance company never materialized, so I came back, and then I ended up working in, I went to work for Aer Lingus Holidays. Long story, went into the travel business, did a travel qualification, ended up getting a job in a subsidiary of Aer Lingus Holidays at the time. worked there for about a year and a half, ended up getting a job in another company in the same building, and ended up spending 14 years working at another company. And that was in insurance, but it was insurance for the travel industry. That was the connection. And worked for a wonderful company, ended up being there for 14 years and got quite high in what was a small company, but got to the position of sales manager in that company. And then around the turn of the noughties, I was maybe a little bit in between. I wasn't great at self-care. I wasn't great at personal motivation. I wasn't great at looking after myself. And evidence of this was in terms of the food I started to eat, and became a very heavy smoker and just started to lead a very lazy lifestyle. And at the age of 27, I kind of had a bit of a wake-up call. I put on 4.5 stone, was an addicted smoker and not overly happy. Decided to change this. This was fast forward to 1995. And I took up, or maybe reconnected with exercise. And because I played a lot of it in school, but I hadn't really exercised much in the next 10 years, apart from a bit of golf. And so I took up exercise, took up running at the age of 1995. And on reflection now, you know, there's a great line from Steve Jobs when he was alive, and he said, when I look back at my life now, I can see all the dots connected. And when I look back now, I'm 52 now, but when I look back now, I can see all of the dots connected, how things were kind of connected to each other. But taking up running or reconnecting with exercise at the age of 27 changed everything, because instead of going this direction, I just altered the direction of my life by 1 degree. And if you continue to go in opposite, or even if it's 1 degree apart, and you continue to sustain that over days and weeks and months and even now decades, you can end up being a very different person. And now I'd like to think I'm a very different person. So instead of being very unmotivated, I'm very motivated. Instead of being not overly ambitious about life, there's areas of my life I really want to achieve my best. And I discovered talents, you know, over the years through challenging myself, that have helped me to become maybe a better skilled person, a more motivated person, and maybe achieving at a higher level than I did when I got off that train in Euston Station in 1986. That was a long answer.
You know what, Gerry, thank you for the long answer, because that's what I really was hoping to get from you. Indeed, the Buddha buses have started already. It's that we get to know you, because, you know, we spoke about this just before the show. People, all they see is the finished product. It's not even the finished product, it's the current product. And, you know, they look at you now and you've got your, you know, your stuff together. You know, but I was making notes there as you were bring us through that journey. You know, you started off hard worker clearly from day one. The trip to London, the 2-minute taxi drive, it perfectly paints the, you know, from a small provincial town arriving in the metropolis of London and not knowing your way around, perfectly describes what goes on there, right? And then 14 years in one company, that's you sort of finding your feet, if you like. But you then admitted, and this is something I didn't know, you were a heavy smoker. And you were 4.5 stone, like, and that was age 27. You're 52. So let's simply divide your life in half. For the first half of your life, you know, you were on the wrong track. Loved your analogy that, you know, you decided to make a 1 degree shift, and it's over that period of time that shift manifests itself. And now we've got a slender, healthy gentleman sitting here in front of us with tons to offer. Tons done, more tons to come. So really exciting. Gerry, thank you for that. Loved also, by the way, your Steve Jobs thing, that we can only connect the dots looking backwards. But we got to realize that now and start making, you know, better decisions, so that in a handful of years when we're looking back on these times, that we're looking back with fond memories. Gerry, that's fabulous. Thank you. So how did the Gerry Duffy Academy come about? Is that 10 years old? Was there a light bulb moment?
No, there was a must moment. You know, there's a saying, must is a great master. So at the turn of the millennium, I started to get itchy feet. I was a lot fitter physically, I was a lot fitter mentally, and that's why I talk now a lot about the value and the impact of physical exercise and the importance of physical exercise. I've never not once exercised and not felt at least that much better having done it. And it helps me just show up in so many ways in terms of my motivation and energy and happiness for life. So that's why I also exercise early in the morning, just to give me that boost or that kickstart every morning. But what I did was, you know, so took up the exercise in 95 and stretched myself over the next 4 or 5 years. And I started to see life in a different way, getting so much mentally stronger and mentally fitter. And I started to challenge myself to set a higher bar in life. And I around the turn of kind of 2000, 2001, that kind of time, I began to think about, well, maybe I need to move on from this company, a great company, but I just felt maybe there's more to life than this company. And now I had great support. Like I still to this day am friends with the people in that company, and including the people that owned the company and I was working for. In fact, my direct boss was my uncle, as it turned out. He came after I did, but he ended up being my boss, and had a great relationship. And he was saying to me, you know, maybe you should look at, maybe he was trying to fire me, I'm not sure, but he was encouraging me to maybe just expand my own thinking and my own ambitions. So anyway, I set up my own business in the property business in 2003, and set up that in my hometown of Mullingar. Set it up, great idea at the time. I was very interested in it, very excited by it, learned an awful lot about it. But fast forward 6 years later, not such a good idea, because now we're in a different world, a different economy in terms of the impact of 07 and 08, and we all, I'm sure, remember that time. So now I still have the same commitments. I've no money coming in the business I set up. I was really starting to do well, but then this hit came along and hit so many. And, you know, must is a great master. I said, well, what are you going to do? Now, let me go back to 2005. Sometimes we might question, why would we challenge ourselves? And you were kind enough to share in the bio about, you know, the 1,500 presentations and the companies I'm fortunate to work for now. That's who I am now. But let me tell you who I used to be, because I used to be the most, well, I'm a professional speaker, and I know I recognize a few professional people in the room, professional speakers in the room, actually, a few colleagues in the room. Great to see you here, and thanks for joining us. But, you know, I do speak a lot now, and I'm very lucky to work with some incredible companies now, and I speak in front of big audiences now, and I have great confidence in it now. But I'm emphasizing the word now, because that's not who I used to be. 15 years ago, this professional speaker was so afraid of public speaking, I had to go to a hypnotist to give me the courage to stand up and address an audience of 4 people. So people, as you said earlier on, Colm, you know, people might just assume, well, sure, listen, he was born with this or always had this, whatever, ability to do this. The complete opposite. Now, I mean the complete opposite. I was pathologically fearful of what is now a passion. And I've traveled a 15-year journey to kind of break through that. Now, the heavy lifting in terms of the mental side of that was in the early first 5 or 6 years, and then more in the physical and developing the business over the last 8 or 9 years. And what I mean by that is from 05, I went from 05, I confronted that fear. I gave a talk to 4 people, and, you know, there's an expression that small keys can open big doors. I only realized 4 years later the true value of that experience, because I didn't want to do it, but I said, no, I'm going to do it anyway, because this is just a limiting belief that you have. I was terrified doing it. But 4 years later, my business has hit this massive wall. And I said, well, what are you going to do? Must is a great master. You've got to do something to meet your commitments. You've got to do something to keep revenue coming into your life and into your account to pay your bills and feed yourself and pay your mortgage and all of that. And I went away to think, and I wrote down, well, I knew I had to come up with something different, because property wasn't just going to get it anymore, and for me. And I wrote down all of my skills and all of my value and to the marketplace, because we get paid for value to the marketplace. And I wrote down what would excite me. And I wrote down one of the skills I was now able to write down was public speaking, because I'd broken through that initial challenge. Now, I was still afraid of it, but I had broken through the initial pathological fear. That was 05. In 07, my brother got married. I begged him not to make me best man, because I knew I would have to give a speech. But he said, no, you're doing it. So again, so glad now, because that challenged me to get to an even higher level, because instead of 4, there was whatever number, 150 people or whatever it was at the wedding. And then a couple of years later, I started to do some talks in just local schools, in enterprise organizations and local business groups. And I was now becoming less fearful, still afraid, but less fearful of it. And 2009 arrives, and I wrote down, oh my gosh, you can do this. And so out of that, I got this idea. And I talk a lot about visualization, about the power of visualization. And I went away to think, and I wrote this down, and I said, maybe you could be a professional speaker. And I closed my eyes and I said, well, what would that look like? Because you can, I had a sheet of paper, and I said, you can write anything you want on this sheet of paper. So why don't you write down something that really interests you? And I wrote down a mix of things that would really interest me around public speaking. I said, well, it's maybe around goal setting, because I was big into goal setting. I was into extreme sport at this stage, and I was doing things that other people used to say, how do you do this? And I knew there was just the lengths of preparation you were prepared to do. So goal setting was a big thing, but also I felt very comfortable wearing a suit. And I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable in a suit. I feel really comfortable wearing a suit. And so I closed my eyes and I said, well, where would you be speaking? And instantly I could see it. I said, I'm going to speak to the corporate world about goal setting. And that was the kind of catalyst, that was the birth of the idea. And then I'm happy to dig in later, but maybe I'll pause and bring Colm back in. Anyway, Colm.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't this a master at work? Please, Bula Bus. Master at work, Gerry Duffy. Absolutely fantastic. The pictures he paints, and even the way you do it, Gerry, you know, you held your hand up as a piece of paper in front of you, and I can write anything on this blank sheet of paper. It's magical stuff. Gerry, you know, thank you very much for taking the time out today to come and share with us. But I do, you know, we have to go back to that. You're pathological, I wrote it down, I was pathological fearful of what has now become a passion. You had to get hypnosis to be able to talk to 4 people, and only 15 years ago, right? There are people living in their fear today of whatever, but they're choosing to do nothing about that fear today. So 15 years from now, they'll still be living in that fear. You chose to, for your own reasons, to step into it, get some help around it, and here we are today. And it's just truly magical. Loved small keys open big doors. Small keys open big doors. Such wisdom in there. Must is a great master. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all taking notes here today, because this is gold dust, right? And I see all the pages coming up. Happy days, great. Gerry, it's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So you're now comfortable in the space. I loved the fact, by the way, that you saw yourself in a suit and therefore you decided your market was the corporate world. I think that's very important. We've got to figure out who we are and where we stand in the universe. I think you're exactly the right man for the job. And but you know where your focus is, which is great. I'm going to ask you to touch on a story, if I may, Gerry, which you shared with me, and it's about being the last man in the room. Would you mind sharing that story? It's set in New York.
Oh yes, yeah. We chatted about this before. Yeah. So I talk about, you know, I'm going to quote Gretchen Rubin. I'm not sure if people are familiar with Gretchen Rubin. She's an American author. She wrote a great book called The Happiness Project. But she says, to achieve mastery. So if we want to master something, so she said, to achieve mastery, enthusiasm is more important than innate ability. To achieve mastery, enthusiasm is more important than, now, by the way, it's a long quote. If you're going to write it down, it's just 26 words in it. So to achieve mastery, enthusiasm is more important than innate ability, because the single most important element in developing an expertise is the willingness to practice. To achieve mastery, enthusiasm is more important than innate ability, because the single most important element in developing an expertise is the willingness to practice. And so in terms of my business is speaking, and I want to become the best I'm capable of. So if I'm really going to live that, I have to be continually innovating myself, challenging myself. And I talk about your willingness to be uncomfortable, because I truly believe our success in anything is determined by how uncomfortable we are prepared to get. And got to be honest, I often find social situations, I often find them quite challenging. But maybe now I realize it's all the more reason to do it, because this is not my quote, but somebody said, if somebody doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And I know I changed in that room with the first talk of 4 people, because it was such a challenge. There's an example of that. Anyway, I was going I invested in this conference to network at this event in New York 5, 6, 7 years, probably about 5, 6 years ago. And I said to myself, I was going to attend this conference, but there was a networking event on the night before. And I must confess, I do find those events quite challenging. But I said, well, if you're going to go to this event, you're going to fly to the other side of the world. You've got to commit to the best. If you're going to network there, you got to just deliver the highest standard you can. So what are you going to do? And I said, I'll be the last person to leave the room. So when I went to this event, and I gotta be honest, I didn't overly want to go to the event. I was really there for the conference, but the networking event, I said, sure, you gotta go. Like, you're investing this, you gotta go. And I wanted to hang out with friends, and this was the night before. I said, no, I'm going to go to the conference, or the networking event, the night before the conference. And I said, right, I'm going to be the last to leave. No matter what happens, I'm going to be the last to leave. And anyway, when I went in there, they said, right, we're going to network for an hour, then we're going to take a break for an hour, and then we're going to network for another hour. I'm not quite sure. There was something on in between. I just can't remember what it was. I thought I'd be in and out in an hour. But anyway, it turns out it was 3 hours. I said, right, okay, you said you're going to be the last to leave. So anyway, the hour is on, then there was something on, the networking was on, then there was something on in between, I remember, like a reception or something. And then there was another hour of networking. And anyway, 50 minutes to go, I'm still there. And we're down to the last 20 or 30 people. And then 5 minutes to go, there's like 8 people left. And then finally, there's just 2 people left, myself and this other guy. And we're walking out the door, and I introduced myself to him, and he introduced himself to me. And bear in mind, I was there to network, to market my business. And anyway, we ended up chatting, and he said, who are you? And I said, who are you? And he told me who he was. And I said, that's a really interesting surname you have. And he said, why? And I said, because that's my mother's surname. And he said, all right, okay. He said, you don't meet too many people with that surname. And then we ended up just having this 2 or 3 minute chat. And he said, why are you here? And I said, well, I've actually flown over. I said, I'm actually doing a bit of a talk at the conference tomorrow. I said, not in the main room. I said, in one of the breakout rooms. And he said, oh, he said, I'll come and listen. Cut a long story short, he ended up hiring me for my biggest ever speaking engagement.
Gerry, I love that. I love that. And I saw that the cafe erupt into applause because it's just a wonderful story. Wonderful story. But you know, how many times could you have bailed, if you like, on yourself? You know, there's the bit in the middle, sure, that won't be missed at the second networking event. You could have bailed then. You could have bailed when there was 15 people left in the room, so sure, I'm nearly there. But you know, I think there's a discipline, a self-imposed discipline, Gerry, dare I say it, in you and how you operate. And I think it pays such huge dividends. And so being the last man in the room, only because you made the commitment to yourself. Now, also, let's be honest here. I think we're all believers in you know, there's an intelligence out there. What are the chances of you being the last man in the room with a man who shared your mother's surname? Like, seriously. So meant to be, as far as I'm concerned, meant to be.
Well, I do believe, I truly believe life rewards us for effort, because it's only when I start to put in a bigger effort that things start to improve. So the very first day I took up exercise, July of 1995, in the very first day I did do 5K. Now, if I'm being honest, I think the reason I was able for 5K was I ran 2.5K in that direction. And then I had to turn, and the cigarettes were back in the house. So that kind of motivated me to get back maybe sooner than I could. But the very first day, I distinctly remember feeling better. And that taught me that 2 things in actual fact. Number 1, behavior matters. Number 2, life rewards effort.
Fabulous, Gerry. Behavior matters and life rewards effort. And that phrase that you mentioned earlier, Eamon has put it into the chat there for people to copy and paste if you wish. Thank you for that, Eamon. To achieve mastery, etc. That long quote is now there for you to take. Gerry, thanks for that. So your business before COVID hit, it sounds like you're on a great trajectory, everything coming together swimmingly, corporate world in abundance, looking for Gerry Duffy. And then COVID hit. Do you mind me asking, what's it like now?
I might describe it maybe in 2 phases, as it were. So the very first one, I remember doing some work in early March, which seems like almost like a year ago now at this stage, even though it's only 3 months ago. And I had an exceptionally busy month scheduled. And I was able to fill that up to the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th of March. And then it was like somebody just opened the trap door and cancellation after cancellation after cancellation, literally just, and I'm sure, I'm not alone in that. I'm sure lots of people in this room today experienced the exact same thing. And for the next 3 weeks, it was very challenging, as in nothing was happening. I did have, previous to this, I had one online client, a really, really good client that represented a good portion of my business revenues, and thankfully I continue to have that client, so nothing changed there with that client, thankfully, but everything else was just a trapdoor. But what started to happen late March, early April, I began to have conversations with some people and started to gather some ideas, and the reality was starting to kick in. Listen, this isn't going anywhere. So I started to just look at my value and how I was presenting and delivering and saying, well, how am I going to adopt this for an online world? Like, it's almost like you've got to be doing something. And I guess I had lots of time because I was at home every day. And so I began to take the core value that I feel I have with companies and to put it into 1 hour modules of content. And I presented that. It's almost like, you know, where I adapted it for COVID, and I said, because I had so many clients that were challenged by it, as I'm sure many of us have been. I said, how can my value help people in their businesses in this? So it's almost like, how can we go from here to here? If this is where we are in COVID, how are we going to get through COVID? And I started to just align my expertise and the things that I'm privileged to do with companies, and to put them into kind of 1 hour modules of content that you might deliver 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. Sent it out to a couple of clients, and thankfully a few clients immediately said, yes, we'll do this, and we'll do it literally straight away. And that starts to thankfully now gather momentum in the last 6, 8, 10 weeks.
I'm delighted for you. Absolutely delighted for you. Thank you for sharing. You see, I think you did describe what has happened for most people. The world fell off a cliff for most people, and most people's businesses went into free fall. The one solace, if you like, that we can all take as a community at large is that we're all in the same boat. We've all found ourselves in the same boat. So everybody around us, from banks to suppliers to whomever else, to staff perhaps, there's a level of understanding because we're all in the same boat. That said, you know, we all had two choices, was to shut down and mothball, or shut down and, you know, maybe throw the toys out of the pram, or mourn the loss or whatever for a period of time. But then, you know, wake up and get back on the horse, so to speak, and figure out how we're going to pivot. And it seems to me that you've done that brilliantly, and I'm delighted, genuinely delighted for you. And the other thing that I picked up, if I may, is, if I picked it up correctly, you had one regular client who was a reasonable sized client who stayed with you. That gave you some continuity. And two things that came to me, struck me when you said that, is we need high value clients. We need people, you know, our businesses that are a significant portion of our business. However, we can't have all our eggs in one basket. You know, that happened down here in the Midwest back when we moved down here 20 odd years ago. Everybody was fixated on the fact that Dell would always be here. And within a handful of years, Dell was gone, and it ripped the economic heart out of the Midwest. And it shouldn't have, but it was that everybody believed they'd always be here, all the eggs in one basket, etc. So hats off to you, Gerry. Lovely spread in your business. I go back to what you said earlier, you're comfortable in the suit. You know the corporate world is where you are at your best, and you perform at your best and serve of your best, and it's paying dividends for you. And I'm delighted on behalf of everybody in the cafe, I'm delighted that's the case for you. And I also want to thank you for sharing that nugget, that you've taken what you would normally do, as we say, belly to belly in a room, and you've, you know, taken what you do naturally and turned it into an online module. Great stuff. I see Amanda's in the room. Would you like to touch on we'll bring Amanda in a minute, but you tell us what's happened with the two of you, if you wouldn't mind.
So, and I didn't realize Amanda was going to be here today. So a very good pal of mine, but also I enjoy a great business relationship with Amanda, and a lady that if you ever want an example of truly serving your people, I think, and I'm not saying it because she's in the room, I didn't even know Amanda was going to be here, but you know, I do a thing around I do a sales piece with some companies, and my only piece of advice, my number one piece of advice in sales is, where I share with sales teams, is you got to care more about the people than you do about the sale. And you know, I often think when I watch Amanda, and for those who are not familiar, Amanda Delaney, who's in the room today, Amanda has a tribe of people that are just, she truly serves those people. It's unbelievable to see the impact that she has on people's lives and the lengths she goes to support people. She's an amazing woman. And Amanda and I have been collaborating. You mentioned Speaker School earlier on, and I recognize a few people here that have been on the Speaker School journey. And Amanda and I regularly do joint Speaker Schools with her community, and she's making an incredible difference, and has set up many businesses, and is running a number of businesses. But Amanda, sorry, I know, apologies for going on about you, but I didn't know you were going to be here, but that's maybe the business relationship is where Amanda and I do joint Speaker Schools with her community, and great to work with those people.
Fabulous, Gerry. Thank you for that. And forgive me for putting you on the spot. Yes, indeed, Sarah Ward has started the Bula Bus there. Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but Amanda has been a fabulous guest on the Coffee at 11 show when we started a number of months back. And Amanda, we'll bring you in a little while. I'd like to just say hello to you, if that's okay. just a little while. Gerry, we're going to go to Q&A from the floor in just a few moments, if that's okay. Two quick things before we go there. The first one is, what do you think life is going to be like post-COVID for you, for Gerry Duffy Academy, for all of us? That's the first question.
Well, I think it'll be a byproduct of what we do, whatever we do. And there's a thing that I often talk about called the 4 keys to success. And so wherever we might be in our businesses, we have a story at any time going on in our heads. And the story might be, well, this is going to have a really tough impact on my business, as an example. It might be a totally understandable story. And when I'm explaining the 4 keys, I like to use it through the analogy of a game of football. So I want you to imagine I'm playing for my team, it's a club team, and we get to our first ever county final. And I'm chosen to play for the team. I make the team and I'm so excited, and the game starts and I'm the corner back. And in the first 5 minutes, the player I'm marking, the corner forward, scores a goal and a point. Now there's a story. We're 1-1 down after 5 minutes. And the story that I'm now playing out of my head is, oh my God, this is the county final. I'm not doing my job. We're going to lose this game. I'm not good enough. That's a story. And if I continue with that story, well, then I'm probably going to continue to get what I've got. So I need to move to, if I want things to change, if I want things to be better, I need to move to the second stage of the 4 keys, but the first thing is I got to change the story. And so the first thing, story has to change. Well, COVID has arrived and it could have an impact, but this is the way it's going to be. And now I'm focusing on what I do want, not what I don't want. So it straight away, it's bringing me to the second stage, which is my attitude needs to change. Well, that's how it was, but this is how it's going to be. So now I'm moving into the second stage. So story, now I'm beginning to change the story, because if I don't change the story, well, then it's probably going to happen. And if it's going to be, it's up to me, I guess. And businesses are always human beings anyway. So my business doesn't exist. It's me and thankfully one other team member. So if it's going to change, well, then I have to change it. So the first thing, people say, well, you got to take actions. Yeah, but the first thing we got to change is our attitude around it. Then we move into the third stage, which is actions. Now, if I continue to bring the actions that I brought in the first 5 minutes, that's not going to work. So I've got to take what I call new actions or enhanced actions. Maybe I got to mark them like I marked them before, but tighter. I got to be tighter. That's an enhanced action. Or I got to try something new, because if I do what I did before, he's going to continue to run rings around me. So story, attitude, new or enhanced actions. And if I do that, there's a very good chance that I'll get better. The 4 key results. Story, attitude, action, results. So I do believe it'll be, with the best will in the world, what I'm focusing on is we talk about control and controllable. What are all the things I need to be in control of? And I got to commit to controlling those to the very best of my ability, and not be thinking about things outside of my control, because there's so many things about COVID. I can't control 99% of things, but instead of thinking about that, I've got to be controlling myself. Because if I'm investing all of my thinking about things that are outside of my control, and I'm not controlling what I can and should be controlling, it's not that I mightn't have the ability to navigate safely, it's just I wasn't controlling what I should have been controlling in the first place. So that's the foundation for getting, I believe, whatever we want.
Fantastic, Gerry. Fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope thank you, Christina from Geneva, is giving us the Buddha bus, the international Buddha bus. But I hope, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you realize what's happening here today. This man does this for a living and deservedly gets well paid for this. And he's come into our cafe today to have a chat. And thank you all for honoring his story by coming in and sitting and listening. But you're getting gold here, and it's just wonderful. And we're only scratching the surface of Gerry Duffy and who he is and what he can offer. And go back to something you said about Amanda, but it's true also of you. And you said that Amanda cares more, in fact, it's part of your sales program, care more about the people than the sale. And my own dad would often say, stop selling, start serving. And Amanda Delaney lives that, but Gerry Duffy also lives that. So Gerry, hats off to you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Gerry, we're going to go to Q&A, as I mentioned. My last question, if I may, is one tip. What would you say to your nearest and dearest? You get through COVID, come out in great shape, the far side by doing blah. What's the one blah for Gerry Duffy, please?
Okay, so I remember I got to give you a long answer to this one, so maybe over 2 or 3 minutes if that's okay. And I found this monumentally powerful. And it ties into a chat that Eamon and I were having, and a few people just before we officially started. I remember I was on the internet one night 4 or 5 years ago, and I saw this very powerful video where this person wrote up the 9 times tables on a flip chart. So 9 times 1, 9 times 2, might be bringing back a few memories for a few people in the room, the maths exams. But anyway, they went down all the way down to 9 times 7. And then they wrote an equals, 9 times 1 equals, all the way down to 9 times 7 equals. And then they start to fill in the answers from the bottom. 9 times 7 is 63, 54, 45, 36, 9 times 3 is 27, 18, 7. And straight away everybody, of course, gravitates, wait a minute, you got one wrong. But what it highlights for us is how we are conditioned to see or ignore all the things that are right instead of just when one, so many things might be right in our life, and yet one thing happens. And don't get me wrong, I'm monumentally respectful of COVID and the impact it has on so many people. But how much more difficult would be, so if 9 times 1 is 7 represents, because sometimes those things definitely do happen in our lives, and we certainly have a big 9 times 1 is 7 now, which is something that we don't want. It's not what we want it to be. We want 9 times 2 is 18 and 9 times 3 is 27. So in order to help me get through it, I've learned the value, and we could bring this into, you know, a gratitude attitude to recognize, yes, COVID is throwing us these challenges, but how much even more difficult would COVID be if 9 times 2 was 17 and 9 times 3 was 22? If those things weren't right in our lives. So whatever 9 times 2 is 18 represents, something that's right in your life. Whatever 9 times 4 is 36, whatever that represents in your life. And I remember I was asked to work with this company a number of years ago, and they were all being made redundant, and I was very respectful of that, very empathetic of that. But I asked them to imagine a scenario if they were going home this evening and they got a phone call, and the phone call was along the lines of, and in this case, the 9 times 1 is 7, represents they are going to lose their jobs, which they were about to do. And they were very much challenged by that, which I totally respect and understand. But I wanted them to suddenly see and maybe to understand that the power to help them get through this period of incredible uncertainty like COVID is the brain. This is where we got to go, is to the brain, because the brain, when you think about it, drives everything. And so what I wanted to show them how was they could reframe the situation and suddenly realize they had this power to get through this period, even though it might have felt so daunting, because obviously they were thinking about mortgages and children and putting food on the table and all other commitments and requirements that they might have and that they needed a job for. And I got them to imagine a scenario where they're driving home that evening, walking by reception on the way home that evening, and the receptionist stops them. And these are the people that are all about to be made redundant, and they're still at work a few months away from being let go. They're walking by reception on the way out that evening, and the receptionist stops them and said, listen, there's a phone call for you. It sounded urgent. You can take it in that room over there. So you go into the room, you pick up the phone, you hear a voice that you recognize, and this is what you hear. Get to the hospital quick, there's been an accident. Get here now. I said to these people, all of whom were about to be made redundant, is it fair to say if you got a phone call like that, you would suddenly become quite dismissive of the impact of losing a job? Because now something even greater is in serious jeopardy, because presumably this represents maybe a family member, which is the 9 times 2 is 18, maybe having the family members in great health. So how much more challenging would COVID be if all these other things were suddenly taken away from us? And what it's designed to do for me certainly was to recognize, yes, at times in my life, things are going to happen that are not what I want them to be. 9 times 1 is 7. But at those times, to recognize and to practice outlining, well, how much more difficult would that be if I didn't have all these other things that are right in my life? And that's the power of framing, I believe, and that's the power of gratitude. And to, you know, how much more difficult would my business be if I didn't have a roof to maybe conduct online sessions or whatever, maybe to have the value that clients now still see in me, maybe to have a great partner that's supporting me in this period, food in the fridge. How much more difficult would it be if I didn't have those things? So if I could harness the recognition that I do these things, I believe it will help me be stronger through the COVID period.
Fabulous, Gerry. Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you very much indeed. You know, we're back to the experiences that you have in your life and the work that you've been doing for many years now, to be able to give us such a comprehensive tip. But it makes perfect sense. I love that fact that 9 times 1 equals 7. is how we can oftentimes look at life, and we can get caught up in that until something more challenging perhaps comes along. Or bottom line is we need to reframe the experience. Fabulous stuff, Gerry. Listen, we're going to go to Q&A from the floor, but instead of me going normally as I do looking for a question, I'm going to bring Amanda Delaney in to say a quick hello, if that's okay. Amanda, you're live.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for that, Colm. I wasn't expecting it. I just saw two of the most incredible gentlemen that I totally admire this morning, and I cut my meeting off and came straight in here to say good morning and have a listen to you all. Fantastic. Gerry, thank you for the kind words. Right back at you. The reason I collaborate with such amazing people is because we're in line of values. And you said it there, Colm, we both love to serve our people, and the humility, you know, the humbleness from Gerry never ceases to impress upon me the importance of staying humble, no matter how, you know, far your business is growing or how many big corporates you're in front of. Gerry is always humble, always grateful and humble. And I love that about him.
Well, thank you for that. I'd like to think I got it from my parents. I do believe I did. And it's interesting you talk about values, and values are, you know, I've only really woken up to the power of values maybe in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And it's unbelievable, you know, and if and that's why I love working with Amanda, because again, we have similar values, and it's very often you might work with somebody and all of a sudden why are we not getting on with this person? We're just, the values are not aligned. But Amanda and I have been working very closely together for about the last 2 years, and we've had some great days together, and it definitely boils down to the values. And it's interesting that the people I think that are in your community, Amanda, they're all of similar, I would believe they're all of similar values. You can just see that in the comments and the posts and the communications and the conversations.
It would be, you know, when I set up my business, like you, Gerry, I had done a lot of personal development, but values just came on my radar only in the last 5 years after I'd done the personal development. And I really wish they'd have come first, because everything makes a lot more sense when we know what the core values are. And I built We Can and We Will and the Passion to Profit based on values. But when I went into coaching, my mentor said, what niche would you like to go into? And I said, well, I can't pick a niche because I'm more about values. So when I defined my client, obviously it was a business owner because it's business mentorship, but I was zoned in on the values of the client more so than what their business was. Now, as it turns out, 14, 15 months on, a lot of my clients are coaches and therapists and service providers, but they all have similar values to me, which makes for an incredible business, and a business that I love to serve my clients because they get me, I get them. There's honesty, there's kindness, respect, all of the values in which I love. So my I suppose advice I give to my clients now is, don't underestimate values when it comes to defining the purpose for your business and your mission for your company, your brand, for you, whatever it is that you're doing, your family. Values are at the core of who we are and how we behave.
Fantastic, Amanda. Thank you for that. And Gerry, that was beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 for the price of 1 today.
Unexpected surprise. Thank you, Colm. Great to see you, Gerry.
And
thanks, Amanda.
Ladies and gentlemen, check the replay. Go back and find Amanda's replay on the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and put in Colm O'Brien Motivation, and there's a whole load, 50 odd shows now. I think this is show 52. Gerry, thank you for that.
Hats off to you.
Yeah, well, hats off to the team and COVID and all those things. This is us pivoting, Amanda. Passion to Profit came from COVID, etc. Okay, listen, we're going to get on with the show. So over to Princess Shelley. Thank you.
Hey everybody, thank you so much, Gerry, for all your great content and your great sharing. I've certainly taken lots and lots of notes, and I've seen everybody else as well scribbling away. It's great to look back on afterwards. With the great comments coming in, it's no surprise. Christine Duff said, thank you. Gerry, I believe in divine timing myself, connections and coincidences. So thank you for that comment, Christine. Nice of you to join us today. And Amanda, who we just heard from there, appreciated. Same storm, individual boats. Well done, Gerry. And it was, like Colm said there, lovely to listen in on you and Amanda's conversation there. Katrina Hodgins joining us here in the cafe. Hi, Katrina. Katrina says, it's great. Hey, Gerry, thank you. Great to see you and hear your great quotes. So she's appreciating the wisdom that you're sharing there. That's nice, isn't it, Gerry?
Indeed, yeah, and some of those quotes, one or two of them are mine, but a few of them are things I've heard from other people, learned from other people as well. That must is a great master. I remember that was definitely a friend of mine said it to me. I don't know who said it, but it's really stuck with me. You know, must is a great master. When you absolutely have to do something, it's amazing what you'll find out about what you're capable of.
I wrote that one down. I loved that one. And Kristen, she has to nip off early for a shift, and she joins us in the cafe most days, and she said she just wants to thank Gerry for sharing his story. I've had the chance to meet him at speaker school, and I'm truly impressed of what a wonderful person and a great teacher and inspiration he is. I'm thankful for having the opportunity to listen to him here again today, and I'm wishing everyone here in the cafe a wonderful day. So I think you'll all share with me that was a lovely comment for Amanda, for Anne Kristen, I beg your pardon, as she left the cafe just before she went to work. So Eamon has popped in the quote and also your 4 keys, your story, your attitude, actions and results. So again, they're great prompts for everybody as you're taking your notes. And Eamon also mentioned that chapter 2 of your brilliant book, The Goal-Getter, Gratitude, and One Word to Change Your Life, the reframing from I have to I get to. At which point Patrick said, great message, Gerry. Christine Duff said, very well said, Gerry. So yes, and then finally, the links are there from Eamon. Jamie O'Shea said, I met Gerry. Hi, Gerry. Jamie, I beg your pardon. Nice to meet you, Jamie. I met Gerry 3 years ago when he was giving leadership and coaching training at the company where I work. I immediately liked Gerry and recognized that I would learn from the experiences and insights he was sharing. Since then, I've managed to see Gerry at different events on average every 6 months. Each encounter has helped me to sustain my motivation levels and provides me with new tools to focus on my goals. My advice now that you've met Gerry Duffy, follow his work and meet him in person as soon as you can. You won't regret it. I think there's a round of applause and a stunning testimonial there. Thank you for your valuable contribution, Jamie. And then, wow, they're all flying in. I'm not going to get to them all. Sinead says she's past guest on our cafe. Sinead from the East Coast Glassmakers. Hi, Sinead. Delighted to see you've joined us again. So lovely to hear from you. Little did we know at Speaker School in March, the world was about to shut down. Always a pleasure to listen to you. You're always so humble, and you should share the story about the rescue remedy.
Oh yeah. I think I'm not sure if people are familiar with Rescue Remedy, but it's a spray you can get in a pharmacy, and just to help calm nerves. And I think I put up the share price. I think I pushed up the share price of Rescue Remedy because I was buying so much of it in the early days. I remember the first talk, probably for the first year, they said to spray a few drops on your mouth. I think the very first talk, I think I drank 2 or 3 bottles of it. Literally, I was just. And it worked because it just, I remember lifting a glass, and that very first talk on the inside, I was so shaking like a leaf inside, but I lifted up this glass and the glass wasn't shaking, and that told me, gosh, this Rescue Remedy must be working. Yeah, so that's the Rescue Remedy story. Thanks. And I used it for quite a while, but thankfully I don't need it anymore.
Thanks for that prompt, Sinead. Thank you for that. Assumpta says Gerry's amazing, incredibly generous. And Brian Barry says, it's always great to hear and watch you, Gerry. You're a great mentor to so many of us. Thank you, and thanks for all you've done. So so many grateful people. The attitude and gratitude is certainly vibing all over our cafe. Christina asked me just to ask you before I hand back to Colm, if you could elaborate more on the behaviour matters. I was going to bring her in for a question, but we are running a little bit short on time. And would you care to elaborate a little bit for Christina on that? She's joining us from Geneva. She's a regular in the cafe. Give us a little wave there, Christina. If you would just elaborate a little bit on behaviour matters. You mentioned it very early on in the interview, and Christina messaged about it.
Sure. So, and thanks, Christina, for the question. So the very first day I changed my behavior, and that day I took up exercise, July of 1995. And I felt a little bit better because I exercised, and the exercise was the behavior. So that was beginning to teach me, well, the behavior I do every day, it really has an impact on how I'm showing up, whether it's positive or negative. And so now I expand this. I was doing a session with a group last week around self-care, and I asked this question, and I could spend an hour just dissecting this question for people to show up at your best each week, or to show up at your optimum best each week. You know, what does an ideal week look like for you? What are the behaviors that you're doing in the ideal week? So for example, if I go to bed late and I get up late, I know I won't be as good. I won't show up as good. So my sleep, going to bed, that behavior really matters. For me, I need to be up at a very particular time in the morning if I want to show up at my best. If I used to eat the wrong food, that was behavior. And so I wasn't showing up at my best. So when I started to just reverse the behaviors, I started to have more energy. So my food behavior matters. So all the things we do every day, they really do matter, whether we're doing them really well or not so well or anywhere in between. So a really simple example on what I call the self-care wheel. If I want to show up at my best this week, a simple example, let's imagine it was a normal week and I was going out traveling or whatever. You know, I would have all my shirts ironed on a Sunday night, because if I'm ironing a shirt every night, I'm not showing up at my best. So that behavior, 15, 20 minutes on a Sunday, iron 5 shirts, get them ready. That behavior helps me show up better. The time I get up helps me show up better. If I want to have less stress in my life, well then maybe getting off the phone, that behavior, I need to get off the phone and not be looking at social media at 9 o'clock at night. That behavior matters. So it's all these things that we do every day, whether we're conscious of it or not, they really do matter. So what are the behaviors that help you show up at your best? If I'm delivering a keynote, if I'm writing the talk the night before, I'm not going to show up at my best. So my behavior a week before really matters, because I need to, if I want to show up at my best in a week's time, I need to have the talk written a week before, because I'm not talented enough to be able to stand up and just wing it, or stand up or start to prepare the day before. I need to spend hours and hours and hours. So I defined that I need to have that written a week before to show up a week later at my best. That behavior really matters.
Thank you for that, Gerry. And I think that certainly answers your question, Christina. Very nicely elaborated there, Gerry. You're certainly great for serving us all with your pearls of wisdom. And it's at this point, I'm delighted to hand back to our wonderful host, Colm O'Brien. Thank you very much, Gerry. You're back in his capable hands.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Princess Shelley. That was just gorgeous. I really love that part of the Coffee at 11 show where I get to kick back and just listen to some of the wisdom that other people have picked up in my guests. In this case, Gerry Duffy, very wise man, and they've picked up different things. We've all heard the same interview. We've all heard it from our own perspective, so perhaps picked out different things. But ladies and gentlemen, would you agree with me that Gerry Duffy is the most understated motivator you've ever come across? I just love his laid back style. He talks very quietly. You gotta, honestly, Gerry, and I mean this is the greatest of compliments. There are too many speakers out there, dare I say it, that jump up and down on stage, rah, 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 and use short-term motivation to get people pumped. I think you've got this way of bringing people in to their own story through your story, and it's magical. You touched on something earlier, you sort of said, well, they're not necessarily quotes of mine, but there are very few, you know, new quotes that you or I or anybody or Amanda Delaney perhaps might come up with. So we draw from all the resources. You know, we stand on the shoulders of giants that have gone before us, draw from those resources, and then we put them together in our own unique ways. And somebody will hear the same words from you, same words from me, same words from Amanda Delaney, but they strike a chord because you said them at a particular moment. I think that's just magical. So Gerry Duffy, you are a gentleman and a legend. Thank you for being my guest on the Coffee at 11 show today. But folks, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. Those of you that have joined us again, haven't been here before, Sinead was a guest on the show some time back, and Amanda, as we said, also see Donald Thurlow who's coming in on Bloomsday. Put that one in your diary. But really looking forward to tomorrow. Donach O'Brien is joining us, zooming in from Bonnie, Scotland tomorrow. Donach is an Irish soul anchored in Scotland, and he shares the same name and same spelling as the 4th Earl of Thomond. So I'm looking forward to connecting those dots, given that the show is actually coming here from Brian Barew's original place in Killaloe, County. So really looking forward to that, Donnacha. You're very welcome to the cafe today. So we'll see you tomorrow morning. So Gerry, you get the final word.
Oh, okay. If I'd only one message with any audience, this is the message I would share. You know, we talk about behavior matters. Exercise woke me up, and it just created something. It created an awareness in me of what I call conscious awareness of the fact I'm alive. And if I'd only one piece of insight to share, the most valuable thing I've ever discovered in my life is I'd encourage you. I try and do it every day. I'd encourage you every day to just make yourself consciously aware that this is a day of your life. And we only get a very finite number of these things. And someday the powers that whatever we believe in will say, well, this is your final day. And then we might say, well, I didn't know that was today. Just give me one more day. And they say, well, you know, what about all the days you had before? What were you doing then? So I'd encourage everybody to just be very aware, like today is the 2nd of June, 2020. It will never, ever, ever be gifted to us again. So just to maybe just do something today that makes you even more aware of it. And I'd encourage you, for me, it's been a truly rewarding thing to do. Just for 10 or 15 seconds every day, just be aware that this is actually an incredible gift that we have, time on the earth, and hopefully the health to enjoy it. So that would be my definitely parting message.
Beautiful. Bula bus, bula bus, bula bus. Folks, I'd like to thank Princess Shelley for producing today's show. Thank you, Princess Shelley. Eamon Smith for grounding us all before and keeping us all safe and secure. In particular, I want to thank wigwam.ie SME Peer Support for their support to allow the show to continue. And finally, Gerry Duffy. Namaste.
Thank you, everybody.